Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Jones, and I'm Executive Vice President of Meridian International Center. Thank you all for joining us for this important conversation on fostering more effective subnational diplomacy as part of the inaugural Symposium on Strategic Subnational Diplomacy. And for those of you who are just joining our program, welcome to Meridian. Our mission is to empower a new era of leaders to advance diplomacy for a better shared future. And through our open diplomacy framework, we are opening diplomacy beyond traditional channels and putting it in the hands of leaders who can shape the future. Business executives, scientists, innovators, artists, athletes, governors, and mayors, and everyone here in this room. You are the new diplomats addressing global challenges that are far too complex for governments to tackle alone. And through our programs, Meridian is the nexus to connect and catalyze leaders with the insights, the networks, and the tools that they need to strengthen international collaboration and drive impact at home and abroad. And since we were founded in 1960, we've partnered with the U.S. Department of State on a range of exchange programs, including the prestigious International Visitors Leadership Program. We've worked with over 180 heads of state, but we've also worked with thousands of leaders from international city councils to mayors, governors, and other municipal officials to strengthen international partnerships. And over the years, we have seen the increased importance of these connections between cities and states, and we've deepened our commitment to subnational diplomacy. Just last year, we developed a partnership with the National Governors Association to train governors' staff members on diplomacy and protocol to empower them to promote a stronger international engagement framework within their states. So today, we are so proud to continue our work with innovative programs like the inaugural Symposium on Strategic Subnational Diplomacy in partnership with the State Department, the Truman Center, and the Melbourne Centre for Cities. Today and tomorrow, municipal and regional leaders from the United States and 8 allied nations are engaging in discussions, workshops, and trainings designed to forge strategies to counter malign influence, uphold democracy, and drive economic prosperity. We've seen that subnational diplomacy works best when collaboration flows seamlessly from city halls to federal agencies to international institutions. And that's why I'm especially excited to introduce our distinguished guests this evening, Mayor Stephen Benjamin. Mayor Benjamin serves as Assistant to the President and Director of Public Engagement at the White House. He served as Mayor of Columbia, South Carolina from 2010 to 2021, and has served as President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the President of the African American Mayors Association, and Vice Chairman of the Global Parliament of Mayors. So there's truly no one better to lead us in this discussion today than Mayor Benjamin. So with that, please join me in welcoming Mayor Stephen Benjamin.
First of all, it's always great when someone reads your bio just like you wrote it. Thank you very much. I will not keep you long as we have an exciting program before you today. But when it became clear that once again the Meridian Center was putting together another amazing gathering of leaders, of global leaders in this space, I insisted on being present to underscore the importance of the work that each and every one of us does in this space. The importance, I'm a mayor. I'm a person who believes, as my dear friend Tim Kelly and those of us who have roots in city halls, ambassador, that cities are a very special place. Cities are natural, living, breathing entities that can't be gerrymandered. They are places where We try to create platforms for human potential to thrive. And the men and women who lead those cities are required to have a different level, not just of IQ, but EQ, and understanding that the challenges we face are indeed global. The challenges we face, indeed, as all across the world, central governments may struggle right now. Means that we must have a pipeline, not only of talent to eventually lead those nations, but also the people who realize the importance of strong economic, cultural, trade, educational relationships that, again, help us all realize that we're all in this together. Some of you know me. I've never seen me with glasses. I don't need them, but I can't see without them. So I'll wear them. Many of you know me from my time as mayor of Columbia and very active in the Conference of Mayors. I spent the last 2 years throwing out my entire old speech book when Tim and I and others would come here, along with Mayor Garcetti and others, and basically say change doesn't come from Washington, change comes to Washington, and all the great things happen in cities. In the last 2 years, I've had to say there's some pretty cool things happening in Washington, particularly at the White House, and we're going to drive things forward. The importance, I will say this, and I will take my seat. I'm a big believer in the 5 Bs. Be brief, brother, be brief. But the importance, particularly as we emerged as a country from the greatest pandemic since 1918, maybe the greatest economic disruption we saw since 1929, and the greatest social unrest we saw after the death of George Floyd since 1968, we saw a moment where the importance of leadership in cities, and not only leadership in cities, but the importance of building strong intergovernmental, intersectoral, public-private, philanthropic relationships that extended beyond the fictional borders that we have separating us. It was critical to do what we believe the most important thing a leader can do, which is to save and preserve human life and allow us to grow. We saw that in the form of a crisis unlike any we have seen over our lives. It doesn't require a crisis, however, for all of us to lead in moments like this, especially as we step into a new country leadership on Monday. It's going to require each and every one of us to step up and continue to do the work. I will say this: cities and metropolitan areas that surround them still make up 85% of our population. 89% of the jobs are there. 92% of our country's GDP created there. If in fact we're going to have a healthy country, we must have healthy cities, counties, states, and strong subnational relationships that help promote that growth. And I was mayor, we established city-to-city relationships in Taichung and Accra and places across the globe that help, again, fortify this growth and recognize us as a strong city of the world. And hopefully, and prayerfully, those of us in this room can continue to help develop those relationships as we go forward. I've been particularly proud, as I take my seat, to say, Ambassador Hashigi and you, Danny, your team, the leadership that you've shown and the time invested in building up this network and continuing to grow this network in partnership with Meridian. So many people in this room in your public and private capacities has been game-changing. And we have to make sure that we work together to see it continue going forward. So I will have to leave. The president's giving his big speech tonight, so we're going to head back over to the White House in a moment. I do believe that the 2 most powerful words in the English language are thank you. My wife believes that they're actually yes, ma'am. I still think they're thank you. So I will leave on a note just saying thank you to each and every one of you for the way that you lead, and just say that as a country, as a nation, as a member of the private sector in a few days, as those of us who invest so much of our time in NGOs that make the world go round, we're thankful to you for your leadership, and we're going to need that much more from each and every one of us as we go forward. Thanks. God bless you.
Mayor Benjamin, thank you. Thank you for your leadership and your incredible service in the administration. And now, to continue the conversation, it's my pleasure to invite up Ambassador Nina Hashigyan, U.S. Special Representative for City and State Diplomacy at the State Department, really the visionary behind this event, the Honorable Tim Kelly, Mayor of Chattanooga, Tennessee, I think, are we waiting for the ambassador? Yes, we have the ambassador of the EU joining us, but we have Robbie Gramer here from the, who reports on national security at Politico. It's been a very busy news day, to say the least. So Robbie, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much. We'll just deal with this awkward space between us in the meantime. I'll save my toughest questions for the ambassador when she gets here as punishment. I'm Robbie Gramer. I'm a national security reporter at Politico. And I'm really thrilled to be here on an otherwise pretty slow news day to cover this. And it's an issue near and dear to my heart because I grew up in Boise, Idaho. I love foreign affairs. I didn't really know what to do or how to get there. Long story short, I'm here. I guess if the ambassador's late, I could spend 20 minutes talking about that journey, but we could also just dive into the panel and catch her up later. But subnational diplomacy is so important and arguably undercovered by the lamestream media. So I'm really excited to have the mayor and Ambassador Hichigian here to talk about this. I mean, we've already seen just from my coverage some really important and poignant examples of subnational diplomacy in recent weeks, as we've seen foreign governments, Canada, Mexico, reach out directly to Los Angeles. Ambassador Hichigian's hometown, to help out, to send firefighters and aid as that city deals with the devastating fire. So we'll get into that. We'll get into beyond that. I guess I'd love to start off with Mr. Mayor, Mayor of Chattanooga here. We were talking in the green room a couple minutes ago about the sister cities, and I think that's a really interesting and poignant example of subnational diplomacy. Can you talk about what that's done for your city, Chattanooga, and really give us some concrete examples of how this whole concept of subnational diplomacy is really helping your city?
Well, I can give you precisely, and thank you for having me. Thanks, Ambassador. It's an honor to be here with you all today. Look, I grew up in Chattanooga, somewhat like Boise, not exactly Los Angeles or New York, but as a teenager, one of our first sister cities was Hamm in the Ruhrgebiet in Germany, and I was an exchange student there. Went on an exchange program. The Sister Cities International Program is a fantastic program, largely focusing on cultural exchange. We can talk more about, we have a lot of other relationships that we might in the vernacular call sister cities that aren't technically our sister cities. Just had a group of students in my office from Tono, Japan yesterday. But again, as a kid, as a teenager, that is what got me interested in foreign affairs, and in fact became fluent in German, and it changed me forever. And so that is, even as mayor, coming into office, I put a very high premium on these relationships, as did mayors before me. Again, so many reasons I could go on and on that this is important to a city and a state like Tennessee. Foreign direct investment is at the top of the list, particularly in the with the current political turn of affairs. And so beyond that, we're heavily engaged in best practice sharing. We've got an intern from Wolfsburg who's actually coming to study with our council. The mayor prior to me had an office intern from Tono in Japan, and we've got a ton of other relationships I could talk about. So there's a lot of examples where it's super helpful to cities.
Ambassador Hichigian, can you talk a bit about, it sounds like the sister cities concept isn't as well centrally organized in the United States as it is in other countries like Germany, like some of our other allies. Can you talk about concrete ways to help, if you could wave a magic wand and be in office past January 20th, 2025, so to speak, where you would like to help sort of organize this and formalize it in a way that can benefit other cities beyond Chattanooga?
Sure. I think sister cities are really valuable. The chair of Sister Cities International is probably in this audience somewhere, and they're a great. They're what cities decide to make of it. So sometimes it's the diaspora population that really wants to connect to their home country. Sometimes it's a city council member 20 years ago who really it came from that place or his parents came from that place. Sometimes it's economically driven. But I think the important piece to us, I would say, is the connectivity, and to use it for whatever you want to use it for. It doesn't have to be a formal sister city relationship, which, as you say, can be, is defined in a whole bunch of different ways. But it's more about the, I'll just give you an example. So when I worked for LA, our mayor traveled to Mexico City and learned about their earthquake early warning system. Came back to LA and said, we need an earthquake early warning system, and developed one over many years. And then the state of California adopted that same technology. And so you have 40 million people now, just ever so slightly safer. But similarly, I mean, when you talk about California, so you mentioned Mexico and Canada didn't just offer to help, they're there, they're helping. There are actual people and machinery that is desperately needed and is working. But just in my State Department role, I know about 5 other countries around the world who have offered to help. And I think there are probably dozens and dozens that I don't know about that just went directly to California, because it's been a pretty outward-looking state. So the point is, how can we help each other? How can we learn from each other? How can we drive economic investment together? And how can we enrich each other's cities through cultural exchange, through student exchange? So it's the concrete stuff that's what matters more than the label.
So you're the first ever special representative for city to state diplomacy. It's clearly so obvious to everyone on the panel why that's needed. So why did it take so long for the State Department to set this up, and what have we missed?
Yeah, we've missed a bunch, I would say, because, well, let me back up. So there was some kind of city and state diplomacy function in the Carter years, I was told. Actually, not told, but read in a journal written by a Spanish author who was writing about subnational diplomacy. And then there was also, I think, a different kind of incarnation for a little while in the like 2010s or so. But this is the first full-fledged office, and I think, I don't really know why it took so long. I think that it's not common in the United States yet to think of mayors and governors as international actors. Of course, they are the ones who are dealing with these transnational threats, right? They're the ones who deal with extreme weather, they deal with fentanyl, they deal with pandemics, they deal with cyber attacks, all of which the State Department deals with. And so connecting the dots and learning from them makes a whole lot of sense. They're also the locus of FDI, right? FDI, foreign direct investment, is not, it has to happen somewhere, yeah. And having local officials involved makes a huge difference. So I could go on and on about their important role, but I don't think it's commonly accepted in the US the way it is in a lot of other parts of the world, where they have huge staffs and huge budgets and tons of international events that are happening. And I think we're getting there. We're starting, but we are at the beginning of our journey.
Real quick, I want to turn to you, but first, have you had any indication from the incoming administration or transition team of if they're going to keep your post?
I have not, one way or the other.
All right, stay tuned for that. Mayor Kelly, it seems like there's increasing skepticism in the United States right now about international engagement, and Washington is notoriously very bad at explaining to Americans its perspectives on why this is important. Can you talk a bit about how you effectively communicate the value of international partnerships to your voters, to your citizens, and why local governments may be better positioned to do so than all these Washington insiders here?
Well, yes. So again, cities are where, in a sense, the state and national levels are abstractions. Nobody lives there. They live inside boundaries. But as Mayor Benjamin eloquently said, the vast majority of GDP, of innovation, it happens in cities. Cities are arguably our greatest human invention. And I have no trouble relating directly to people about the value of this sort of thing. Again, despite the narrative, again, xenophobia is just a cheap shot it's an easy thing to do. But my sense is that rank and file Chattanoogan's fully embrace it. I get zero pushback from our efforts at subnational diplomacy and international relations. We, as well as Columbia, South Carolina, recently became a sister city with Accra, and I sort of in Ghana, and expected some sort of eye rolling and pushback. There was none, right? I mean, the people actually do appreciate it. They understand it. We have a lot of international employers in Chattanooga. So again, I think it is just sort of, we have this unfortunate kind of Orwellian structure in the United States, but the two-party system. So it's just an easy punching bag. But my sense from a mayoral perspective is that it's not a third rail politically.
Okay. Can you give us an example of I'm hungry for good news as someone who usually reports on only bad news. Can you give us an example of how this has come up, a specific example of how your city has embraced an international partnership with Accra or one of your other sister cities?
Well, again, we have a group of students there now visiting from Tono. Again, probably, and again, it's one of our older sister city relationships. They live with host families in the city. They tour around over the course of a week. They get a lot of press while they're there. The same thing with our German sister cities. We also have I'll give you another example, not a formal sister city, but again, potentially even more, particularly considering the current political environment in a state like Tennessee. Some friends with USAID introduced me to the mayor of Trost-Jeanette's when I was, a couple of years ago at a mayoral event. We're going to form a relationship. We did. We have been working really hard. We can't do it inside city government. We organized a committee in Chattanooga. There's a small Ukrainian population there to help raise money, to buy generators to help the people of Trost-Jeanette's. They came and spoke to our council. Again, it's a Republican state. We have our fair share of people who are skeptical of the war in Ukraine. Not one crossword, not one protest. Because, when people are looking at each other in the eye and from a city-to-city perspective, humanizing one another, then it's much, much easier, right? And that is the value. I will kind of take this further. You didn't ask, but, we were lucky enough, Mike Bloomberg, God bless him, has spent a ton of money to connect mayors across the country and across the world. And I think he realizes that, particularly around climate work, right? He got a lot of mayors involved and invited to COP40 because, again, that's where the expenditures happen that are going to move the needle. And in those programs, mayor to mayor, you begin to realize you've got more in common with your fellow mayors, whether that's in, Riga or Johannesburg or Chattanooga, then I got more to talk about with those folks than I do with my state legislators. Mm-hmm. All cities are essentially the same in essentially the same way. And the people, if you will get them together, looking at issues in their cities, they immediately, the light bulb comes on, and the sense of humanity is just immediate. So it's just not a problem if you can connect the dots.
Yeah, so are there any impediments at the federal government level to you connecting the dots in the future? Well, and what are they?
Look, there was a book written recently. I've gotten through about the first 2 chapters, and I've got a plow. I'm going to paraphrase here, but I think it's like if mayors ran the world. But the thesis is not, if you sit in a Harvard Bloomberg City Leadership Initiative cohort, which I've done, there is this school of thought, right, that you can think of the world as a network of cities. And primarily, right? And again, the state and federal level are really abstractions that essentially make rules for us, hoover up tax revenue, and figure out how to give it back to us. But that, I think what is explored in that book is that it, to some extent, I guess it represents a threat, right? From a powers perspective to the state and federal level. But I can tell you that, mayors are not at all, it's been said that, I think it was Bill Peduto in Pittsburgh that said there are really 3 types, three political parties in the United States: Republicans, Democrats, and mayors. And I think that's true of the world. I'm telling you, if you talk to a fellow mayor from another part of the world, you immediately have a long list of things to talk about and relate one-to-one immediately. It's just not, it's a little bizarre, honestly.
Have you encountered skepticism toward your role in the State Department since you started? I mean, you're breaking the ceiling on this type of role, at least at the formalized federal level here.
Yeah, I thought I would. Well, I thought that there would be not that much interest broadly among mayors and governors. After all, I'm in a really global city. That is not the case at all. U.S. mayors and governors totally interested in international relations for all the reasons that Mayor Kelly here has said. It's jobs, it's solutions, it's culture, it's skills. So they're interested. I think among the diplomats of the State Department, I think some were puzzled to begin with. But a lot of people have now get it, and I give all the credit to the Secretary of State and the 2 deputy secretaries who worked with our team a lot, they were carrying the torch for us, and so I think I can definitely say that after 2.5 some years, there's a lot more buy-in than there was when I got there,
and
my team got there more importantly than me.
You were also first for many things, but also first deputy mayor of Los Angeles for international engagement. Can you talk about what you learned from sitting in LA that you brought to the State Department that Washington just might not get?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just city government is just so different from federal government. It's responsive, it's quick, it's life or death issues all the time. It's that you have to show the value for your residents. You can't just, you can have, there's some amount that can be just relational, but most of it has to be like, okay, what are you doing for me? Right. And so that, I think having been in a city, I think I maybe understand what cities are about and how they work maybe slightly more than your average person.
And can you talk, Mayor Kelly alluded to this, but a lot of foreign policy issues are becoming a lot more local. Climate change is the obvious factor. We're seeing that in Los Angeles now. The fentanyl crisis. Both the outgoing Biden administration and incoming Trump administration have talked a lot on the national security side about potential threats of Chinese companies buying up land or buying up industry, critical infrastructure, and a lot of the onus for screening that is on city, state, local governments. Can you just talk a bit about the future of cities in U.S. foreign policy in the context of some of these bigger global issues?
I hope it grows because, we're going to be more urbanized as a world. We have a large urban population in the United States, as is said. They are getting involved in all these issues because they have to be. We do, just to, take those couple of examples. So on fentanyl, we connected a bunch of city mayors, a bipartisan group of city mayors with the key negotiator and the key head of who works on fentanyl in the State Department. And these conversations had never before happened. So the mayor of Bakersfield could say, the trends look like this, they're coming through here and then they're going to there. And a different mayor could say, we've set up vending machines for narcotics in some of our areas. And then they didn't know that the State Department is working on fentanyl crisis. We've also, in the context of briefing our cities and states and counties on de-risking their interactions with the PRC. So here's a few tips. We're not telling you what to do, but you should just understand the bigger context here. We've invited them to also, if it works for them, talk to their PRC, their Chinese interlocutors about fentanyl and about what it's doing in their places, so that message then gets back to Beijing, and they have worked to some degree to reduce the precursors that are going to Mexico. So as an example, climate's another example that we could talk about. The mayor of Boise is, a real climate champion. Whatever she's doing in Boise to reduce carbon is affecting the entire globe to some degree. So there's just, there's all these connections that can happen. And, in general, I feel like it's soft power for the United States, right? When Mayor Kelly is in Germany, that's he's there carrying American values with him. And we could support that more than we do.
How much do you think that will change when, say, theoretically, the person in the Oval Office changes?
I think of it as a tool, and you can use it to advance your priorities, whatever your priorities may be. So they might want to work with governors on FDI attraction. They might want to work with governors on foreign direct investment. They might want to be sure that there's an even broader effort to alert local government to PRC engagement and what that might mean for them. All of those things I think are bipartisan. We were fiercely bipartisan in the way we worked, and we worked with a lot of Republican governors and mayors.
Yep.
Because when your constituent is stuck in a war zone, like, who do you call, right? And we're just the front door. So or if a delegation is visiting from Uzbekistan, and you're going to meet with them, you don't know anything about the U.S. relationship with Uzbekistan. We're the people you call. So our bread and butter was answering just a lot of really wide-ranging questions from from across the country, every region, and every party.
Have you seen a noticeable difference beyond Ambassador Khashoggian's important job in interest, a demand signal from Washington in trying to engage mayors, or is it mostly demand-driven?
Honestly, full credit and thank goodness for Ambassador Khashoggi. No, come on.
That's fine. We have our third panelist.
No problem.
Then you can make fun of me.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Hey, Ambassador. Thanks for joining us.
Would you like me to finish?
Yeah.
Briefly, not much. I mean, Ambassador Khashoggi's done an incredible job of kind of spearheading the subnational diplomacy effort. Again, I think that the issue really is crystallizing or solidifying that, because it has happened in an informal way in the United States for many, many years, as we've discussed. The effort, I think, over the last few years with Ambassador Khashoggi in there has been really to try to explore how to better leverage it and formalize it, because it happens and is happening. I was in Senator Haggerty's office today, and of course, former ambassador to Japan certainly understands the value of this stuff. I think that as far as going forward, the question is whether they will see fit to be able to lean further into this for any number of reasons, or go a different direction.
And Ambassador Nilivshina, thanks so much for Ambassador to the European Union and former Lithuanian Vice Minister, being fashionably late, which is always cool in my book. In case you hadn't heard, we're talking about subnational diplomacy. It's very interesting. It's been a great conversation so far.
I actually got the direct messages from there, so I was reading.
Oh, okay, great. All right. You have a very great staff then. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I've got some questions for you, and now that you're here, I can ask you.
He saved all the hardest ones for you.
Yeah. Are you going to sell Greenland to Trump?
Well, I think that the most important is actually that I was doing a subnational diplomacy just like half an hour ago, and trying to get here. I was meeting a senator from Alaska. And Greenland is the question, but not because of selling or not. It's actually part of Denmark, who is NATO ally. But actually, I think that the cooperation between Arctic nations is one of the examples of the subnational diplomacy, if you wish, and it's quite a long-lasting cooperation, because of the cultural proximity and cultural relations, historical relations. And as the EU, we are investing quite a lot in order to encourage because some of the European Union member countries are, of course, the part of Arctic Council. But nonetheless, we do invest in the especially youth cooperation on the subnational level. But I strongly believe in what Mayor was saying, that cities are real, and the rest is just
abstract.
Well, on that, I mean, there can be, one could argue, there might be tensions in the U.S.-European relationship in the coming few years. Can you talk a bit about how subnational diplomacy can be a ballast to help steady the ties? I mean, do you see it as a port in the storm where even if national governments are trading barbs, starting trade wars, et cetera, that the city-to-city or local ties can be a hedge against further tensions?
Well, first of all, I do believe that we should not go into the trade wars.
All right.
And I don't believe
you heard it here first, folks.
And there are much more things we have in common, not only the security challenges and some economic challenges from some of the countries which are act in a non-market way, where we have to act together. But definitely, whenever we face the challenges, the pain actually will be real again in cities, states, and municipalities, if you wish, on the European side. We will feel, well, you will feel the pain of that, because the trade is not some kind of the very it is an abstract concept in a way, but when you go to the numbers, those numbers actually goes down to the very concrete place where there's a concrete plant built, where there's a concrete production going on, where the concrete people are employed, and those goods then go to other side of Atlantic. Honestly, we have 1.7 trillion of trade a year, which actually is 2 million a minute crossing Atlantic.
Exactly.
We are the biggest trading partner, and we to each other, we are the biggest investor, which goes above 5 trillion in the investments in both countries. And but sometimes, that's the billions. I don't even know how many zeros to put at those trillion or whatever. But look, we can look differently. More than 10 million people are employed because of the trade and investment we have in the transatlantic level. And then once again, it's not really something very abstract. Those people are employed in South Carolina, in Texas. By the way, Texas is the biggest trading partner for European Union, not like the California is the second one, but quite with the substantial difference. The biggest investment destination is South Carolina, especially in certain sectors. And I can go through. There is only, with exception of 3 states, where EU is not the largest investor in those states. So, and we are the largest trading partner for almost all 50 states, and not the largest for the 51st. But.
And I actually have a concrete example of what you're talking about, Ambassador, which if you, in the news yesterday, close to home, the state of Kentucky, Cooperage just closed, Brown-Forman just closed a Cooperage, which builds the barrels for whiskey, because of lost market share from the last round of trade wars. They lost the market share, they never caught it back up again. And I can assure you, the mayor of Louisville is going to be talking to his senators, and that is going to work its way back up the line, and hopefully have some sort of an impact.
Losing whiskey barrels seems like a good way to lose a future election.
Yeah,
in certain states.
There are real consequences to these.
There we go, Ambassador Hichigi, that's your pitch for your successor here. Yeah. Think of the Kentuckian whiskey barrels. I'm going to go to audience questions in a minute. I just asked that you ask questions, not do 10-minute monologues. But before we get to that, just one last question, just open-ended. I mean, where do you see the future of subnational diplomacy going in the next 10, 15 years or so? It sounds like everyone would agree it's on the ascendancy, but will it be on the ascendancy in a way that actually makes an impact on a global scale? and maybe calm some geopolitical tensions that we're seeing right now. Ambassador, I'll start with you.
You know, that's a hard question. I do think what I want is it for to be just normal in the United States for mayors and governors to do international work for the benefit of their constituents. That's what I would like to see. You know, whether it adds up to calming geopolitical tensions, I don't know about that, because, you know, whereas mayors get along really easily, sometimes countries don't for all kinds of reasons and some very legitimate reasons. But it's still the case that even with those tensions, cities, partnerships, regional partnerships can get a lot done that benefits their people.
Well, and I think it will only grow. I mean, again, my experience with my Harvard Bloomberg cohort is remarkable. We still, communicate regularly. We get together at Bloomberg City Lab every year. It only grows. There's no talk of partisanship, not even a hint of it. Again, I'm a nonpartisan mayor. I've encouraged other mayors. You know, it doesn't help when it's not really helpful to put on the jersey. I mean, a lot of times mayors may have future political aspirations, fine, well, and good, but it only gets in the way, you know, when there's a change, certainly in this country, in administrations. But I think technology will be part of this. It really helps to preserve and amplify city-to-city best practice sharing and communication. And so, the toothpaste is not going back in the tube. The question is, how does it, how it crystallizes.
Ambassador?
Well, we were, as the European Union, we were developing the notion of the subnational diplomacy probably since the 90s. And the understanding and the interest of the subnational diplomacy have been growing. And I have to say, and it's not only because, someone has tensions on the tensions, so you have to have the back channels. It's, sometimes it works very handy for the diplomats, but in general, there's really kind of I would say really grassroots, if I may put like this, the interest in that. We just kicked off a couple of weeks ago, actually, a new program with their dedicated even finances for that, because there was a constant request whenever I traveled across the US last year. So what could we do together? Because, we need good lessons learned, not to repeat your mistakes you did. And for example, making our buildings more efficient, looking how, circular economy works, how to make, our, parks nicer, if you wish. And this was kind of a constant question. So we decided to start our kind of really a program which we really would not do anything as a diplomat. What we do, we will encourage actually city to city or region to region cooperation. And this is only, in the beginning, it will be only for 4 years, but I'm sure the interest will be, we already see the huge interest for it.
And we did that through the German government, by the way, through the Urban Diplomacy Exchange, and learned a tremendous amount about wastewater treatment, urban planning, all of these things that improve both of our cities.
So Brussels can catch up. You heard it here first, subnational diplomacy on the ascendancy. I'll take a round of questions now. Anyone who's interested, you can raise your hand. It looks like there's mics running in the back. Yeah. I think she'll come to you.
Hi, Miriam Safi at the State Department. My question is on how subnational diplomacy can be used to advance responsible artificial intelligence, arrangement on climate, and how the city-to-city exchange. It's in the U.S. we don't have a federal privacy law, so California has its own GDPR, as Ambassador Chiga knows, and states are sort of creating their own frameworks. So how, and then the EU, of course, has the EU AI Act. So how can cities be these incubators for getting it right on this balancing act between innovation and regulation? Because there's sort of this tension. And it seems like cities could be the right place. But I'd be curious what's already out there in the space.
And I'll just bundle one or two more questions. Yeah, sir, in the back with the sweater. Yeah, right there. Yep.
I'm Eric Zalkman. I'm a student at the University of Cambridge. On a geopolitical level, it seems as though, in part, the cause of the rise of the multipolar order and the fall of American hegemony has been in part due to a very Manichaean, archaic foreign policy on the federal level. How can cities provide that malleability and that compartmentalization today without subverting national interests or national policy?
Great questions. AI and don't subvert national interests with all these geopolitical tensions. First takers?
I mean, I can jump in on the AI thing because I'm actually quite involved with that at the city level. Look, I believe if you think about democracy being sort of in threat now just as a utilitarian concept, I mean, can democracy solve people's problems? I think, better than a centralized technocratic government like the PRC. I think AI is going to be a huge part of that, right? I mean, I really think if you think about restoring faith in government, we're working really hard to put all of our city code into a large language model so that, people need to figure out, well, can I put a fence up here? Can I do this? Can I do that? We can tell them very quickly, right? I mean, AI may not do it, but it will help us essentially give them better answers faster, right? So and I think cities have a leadership role to play. We're working really closely with Google on this to kind of wade in and break things. Again, I'm a big fan. I'm not a typical politician. I come from the entrepreneurial world. Again, one of the books that we were exposed to at the Harvard program was a book by Mitch Weiss called "We the Possibility," about public entrepreneurship. And so my administration practices very heavily in that realm. And we believe very much that we have to be careful. We'll probably make some mistakes, but that we have a role to play in kind of pushing that forward for that very purpose. In the public interest.
Well, and on top of that, the city-to-city cooperation, when it comes to that, is if they do that and if they practice AI and they see that it's successful, I don't know, for the landowners, let's see, and they can share that best practice with the cities in Europe, I think that we will benefit and we will just move even faster than we have. So we don't need to repeat. So that's kind of the logic of sharing of the best practices. Sometimes you don't need to copy. You just look what others do and what works well and not. And it's and if you think, for example, cooperation, we have tremendous cooperation with some of the places in California, but as well in Colorado. The one of the states which actually develops the privacy laws as well. On the federal versus city and the national interest, I think that it's even more complicated in Europe, if you wish. So when we refer to the subnational diplomacy, you have to know that I'm not referring to the national states. I'm actually referring to cities and regions, and it's very different. We have very centralized countries. Like I'm coming from Lithuania, everything is like very centralized. The government has to say, that if the city can engage in cooperation, well, not to probably people more or less understand what are the frameworks for that. Then we have the countries which are very federal, like Germany or Belgium, which, they're still the foreign policy is run by federal government in Germany, although in Belgium, the regions actually can have and can sign international agreements. And there were some issues just recently, like probably 5 years or 6 years ago, with, for example, EU agreement with Canada. We couldn't manage to finalize the negotiations because some of the Belgian regions were not in accord with that.
Was it the
Wallonians?
Okay, yeah.
But actually, both were not really very happy. But that's kind of that's more about the process, I think. What is happening, because as you discussed earlier, and as when I crashed here, is that about the realities, because there are certain interests that people start to feel on the ground. And sometimes you have to build that up this interest, okay, that we need a cooperation on AI. And in order to kind of to make it work, the better public services, or to make it better efficiency of buildings, or how we like reuse the batteries, for example. So we need a cooperation on the local level that pushes the question up to the government. Whereas, like, maybe we have to do something more on the federal government to government level, or government to the international organization. There are some issues which always will go top down, and it's a national security, because you have to see the global picture in order to decide. But and by saying it, it's still not really kind of so linear. It could be that the discussions still be going on, where this national security threshold is put. So I think that everything is about in the dialogue. Sometimes, well, now it's a very long answer, but sometimes we're kind of very much stuck in our federal government thinking that we will say, and this is how it will be, kind of forgetting that we have to check with the reality, to do a reality check.
Yeah. Ambassador, I'll give you the last word on
I'll be really quick.
questions. Yeah.
So on AI, and I think the cooperation will probably naturally start to happen as cities start to experiment with it, but it is useful to have an organizing platform. And so I think there's at least a couple think tanks that are thinking about doing that. On the question of, city interests contradicting national interests, my experience is that mayors, governors, county officials, all elected local officials are serious patriots. They do not want to contradict American foreign policy. In fact, they've been extremely useful to American foreign policy in my experience in the last 2 years, in terms of the relationships they make, and they can thicken a bilateral relationship that we care about. They can add to a multilateral initiative, like we held the City Summit of the Americas. By meeting them, we're introducing ourselves to future heads of state. Oftentimes, they're active on climate and on fentanyl and all these other transnational threats we've talked about. So I'm not saying that it could never happen, but it's never happened in my 2.5 years, and I can't. I think it'd be very rare for it to happen.
I've got time for one, maybe two more questions. If there are others in the audience. Yeah, right there.
Thank you. My name is Willa from the Harvard Kennedy School, and I wanted to ask you all, what changes do you envision to international organizations, such as multilateral development banks or United Nations agencies, to empower city and state-led action to combat a lot of the issues you described?
And one more. Yes, sir, right there.
Yes, hi, Jesse Bernstein from the Department of Justice. And I'm curious to hear from the panel about their views on the utility of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we know, Ambassador, that Los Angeles has been a leader on the Sustainable Development Goals, and curious to hear views on that, and just a plug for cities that are here that the Department of Justice convenes cities around SDG 16, which is focused on access to justice, and we're looking to grow that work. So happy to talk to more folks in the reception about that. Thanks.
Want to take the first stab?
Yeah, well, that's a very, very complicated question. I think that in order to, it's in a way it's related. Actually, I have to say that those two questions are very much related. How we do implement the goals, SDGs, or in general how we face the challenges. And their answer, like the banal answer, the diplomats will say, we'll face those challenges together. But I think that right now, looking from the very European perspective, we really see it's worth investing. And and because usually people kind of think, the World Bank financed something, or the EAB financed something. But honestly, it's always the concrete project with the concrete initiative, with the concrete city standing behind. And when, for example, you have an infrastructure development project, which is submitted, be it a World Bank, EAB, be it IMF, whatever, it will always be someone behind that who are like real people, real companies, real municipalities, real cities. So I think that sometimes we kind of imagine that this is something like really very grandiose, but the people usually, there are concrete ideas behind that, and even it doesn't really very much matter and differ if it's a Europe or it's US or it's actually African countries. And for example, even project we have on Lobida corridor, which is we are trying to build on PGII on this side and a global gateway on the EU. But if you look at the description of the project, it actually names all the municipalities there where the infrastructure will be going through. So, I think that maybe the submission is a bit of the project sometimes where you have to have government standing or several governments standing behind, but maybe this can be kind of tackled in the future, but in general, it's always about very concrete things.
And Ambassador Hashigian?
Yeah, I agree with that. On the other hand, I've heard a lot of frustration from worldwide cities that they can't go to banks and get their projects funded directly, that they have to go through the state. And so if they are an opposition leader, their country, national leadership may not be interested in, applying for grants or loans for their subways, for example, for their metros. So, but there is an effort to change that among cities. There are groups of cities, mostly not with the United States' involvement, honestly, mostly in Europe, that are pushing the UN to have better channels outside of UN habitat, which really is, its own little thing on the side and not necessarily central. It's just basically housing and some other things, but in other words, like more at the center of the UN power structure. So that effort is ongoing.
And Mayor Kelly, I'll give you the last word for the panel.
Fair enough. So again, I think one of the challenges we've had broadly is illustrating the value at the city level of sustainability goals. I really wish we could have named our climate action plan a sustainability plan. The right has certain kind of third rail words that are trigger words, and we didn't. We plowed through. We got a climate action plan passed for the first time in our city's history. The thing is, I rewrote most of it though to talk about efficiency. Right? Because most of these strategies, not all, but most, certainly enough to keep us busy for the next 4 years, will save you money. We're using a WIFI loan to convert our wastewater plant, to take flared methane, turn it into compressed natural gas, run our garbage trucks off of it, which is going to take a huge electrical load off of the efficiency of the plant. It's going to, and that's going to save us a ton of money. And so that just changing the messaging, right, and speaking to people in terms that they can understand, I think is a really piece of low-hanging fruit.
Excellent. Well, let's give a warm round of applause to our panel. Thanks so much for taking time.
Thank you to our wonderful panelists, Ambassador Luciana, Ambassador Hashigian, Mayor Kelly, for your leadership for this conversation. Thank you, Robbie, for your moderation. My name is Max Boucher. I'm the Director for City and State Diplomacy at the Truman Center. For the past 2 years, Truman has been working closely with the State Department, with Meridian, with the Melbourne Centre for Cities to make this event happen tonight and the symposium that started this morning until tomorrow. I'll keep it short. This panel and the conversation that we've had since this morning signal an important mindset shift that recognizes that city and state and local government leaders play a crucial role on today's thorniest issues. And since this morning, we talked about countering disinformation, managing relations with strategic competitors, migration, climate, critical minerals. And local is the level where the rubber meets the road, and local governments are this critical source of innovation and solutions that matter for our collective prosperity, our economic security, and the safety of our communities.
We also saw firsthand how the connections between our countries, and we have folks from the European Union, from North America, from East Asia, from Oceania, that connections between our countries are much richer and deeper and durable and multi-layered because they are driven by local leaders and at the local level. And finally, this symposium and this conversation shows that it turns out diplomats and local leaders can be great partners. And the benefits of a closer dialogue between the local, the regional, the national, and the international level. So this symposium, we believe, is laying the foundations for stronger multi-level dialogue in the future. Once again, a huge thank you to our panelists. And with that, this is not the end of tonight's event. It's my pleasure to invite you all to join us for a networking reception over at Meridian House. So Meridian staff will escort you for a very short walk through the historic Linden Grove. I'm also told that if you left your coat on the coat rack, don't worry, it will already be brought over to Meridian House. Again, thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at the reception.